The email hit my inbox at 0758 hours, urgent 0800 ASAP with no subject line. Just caps lock panic from someone who'd probably never been in an actual emergency. I'm Dan Sullivan, 51, divorced, and I've kept America's freight moving for 17 years. That morning, some privileged kid was about to learn why that experience matters. Old Marine habits die hard. I arrived at 0755 because Semper Fi means you're never late, not even to your own execution. Tyler Bradshaw was already in my usual chair, 29 years old, squeezed into a designer blazer, tapping an expensive pen like he was ordering lunch instead of gutting the guy who built half their systems. Dan, he said, stretching my name like it tasted bad. Thanks for coming early. We'll keep this brief. The HR rep sat silent in the corner. Wouldn't make eye contact. That's when I knew the verdict before the trial. After reviewing departmental efficiencies, Tyler started with LinkedIn buzzwords. We've concluded your role has become non-essential. Streamlining legacy costs, fresh perspectives. Effective immediately, you're relieved of duties. He smiled like he'd solved world hunger by firing the guy who prevented their logistics operation from collapsing. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The same anger that got me in trouble during my second deployment. But 17 years of corporate discipline kept it locked down. No begging, no speeches about years of service. Just slid the laptop across like dealing cards and stood up. Roger that, kid. Walking through my office, I grabbed personal items, family photos, Marine Challenge coin, my old drill instructor's quote, "Proper preparation prevents poor performance." And tucked under the drawer, a flash drive labeled Clause 15D. At 51, starting over wasn't exactly the plan. 2 kids in college, alimony payments, and now this. But Marines adapt. I didn't badge out. Told the receptionist, "Don't kill my access just yet." The kid thought he'd eliminated dead weight. He had no idea he'd just unplugged the power source. 20 minutes later, I stood in my kitchen, setting the box of personal items on the table. That bottle of Maker's Mark I'd been saving sat untouched. Work first. Instead, I walked to my security cabinet, punched in the 6-digit combo unchanged for 17 years. Inside, contracts, reviews, and the sealed envelope labeled Bradshaw Original. The contract from when Harold Bradshaw's company was bleeding money and I hadn't just stepped up. I'd rebuilt their entire back end from scratch. Wrote the freight routing protocols on my own equipment, in my own kitchen, living off takeout and determination. I hadn't asked for a bonus when we saved them. I'd asked for something smarter. Harold Sr. had been desperate enough to give it to me. Clause 15D, 3 paragraphs buried in legal language. IP rights to software I authored on personal equipment. 2. 8% equity stake if revenue thresholds were met, which they had 4 years ago with no payout. And the key, all executive restructuring required my approval if my systems were still in use. They were. They just renamed my Sullivan Freight Protocol to Bradshaw Logistics 2. 0 last year, like new paint could hide who laid the foundation. I pulled out my phone and started scanning documents. 1 copy to personal email, 1 to my employment attorney who'd helped write the original clause, 1 to Big Jim Morrison, board member who once said over beers, "If those boys turn on you, send proof and I'll handle the politics." By the time I finished, 3 things were clear. Tyler had made a massive legal mistake, the company was exposed on multiple fronts, and I held all the cards. The bourbon could wait. Tomorrow wasn't about proving Tyler wrong. It was about teaching the entire board why you don't discharge a Marine who survived actual wars. But sitting there in my empty house, part of me wondered if I was too old for this fight. 17 years of loyalty, and it came down to some kid with daddy's password thinking experience was just legacy cost. I pushed the doubt away. Some battles you don't get to choose. You just make sure you win them. Tuesday morning, Harold Bradshaw Sr. returned from medical leave with surgical stitches, a short temper, and the sinking realization that leaving Tyler in charge had been like handing a toddler a chainsaw. His assistant Marlene, Army veteran and scary as hell at 63, met him at the elevator with papers and a Post-it. Coffee first. The moment Harold stepped into his office, he saw it. My contract printed in triplicate, centered on his desk like a legal bomb. Clause 15D circled in red. For a second, hope flickered. Maybe this was just noise, an ex-employee fishing for sympathy money. Then he saw his own signature at the bottom, notarized, dated the week after I'd pulled his company from near bankruptcy with systems I'd built on decade-old equipment. Harold sank into his chair, stomach knotting worse than the surgical site. Not from recovery, from recognition of his own mistake 17 years in the making. He'd given me that clause because I'd saved everything. Now his son had just handed me the keys to destroy it all. "Marlene," he called. "He's coming up." Harold stared at the contract like it was his own death warrant, which, in corporate terms, it might be. Tyler breezed in with that MBA swagger. "Welcome back, old man. Don't worry, I streamlined operations while you were out. Cut dead weight. You always said reduce costs, so I reduced." "Did you fire Dan Sullivan?" "Yeah, totally legitimate. HR approved. Ancient role, dead weight." Tyler dropped into his chair, leg bouncing with nervous energy. "We need fresh blood." Harold's voice stayed level. "Did you read his contract?" Tyler shrugged. 100 pages of legal nonsense. He emailed the board some old PDF, probably hoping for payout. Standard bitter employee move. Harold slid the contract across. Tyler picked it up like a menu. Clause 15, paragraph D. Veto rights over structural changes. If his software's still running, which it is. Firing him without board review breaches contract. Tyler blinked twice. "That can't be real." "Why would you agree to that?" "Because 17 years ago, this company was hemorrhaging money and Dan wrote the system that kept us alive." Harold's patience cracked. "That clause is real. So is his equity stake. If he pushes this, he doesn't just get his job back. He owns part of yours." Color drained from Tyler's face. "But I filed termination." "Severance is processed. Then pray he doesn't cash it." Harold watched something break behind his son's eyes. The first crack in that LinkedIn-fueled confidence. "Dan doesn't make threats," Harold said quietly. "He makes moves. If he contacted Big Jim, he left it hanging." Tyler knew Big Jim's reputation. Tyler stood, fists opening and closing, reality finally penetrating his designer armor. "You didn't fire an employee," Harold said. "You declared war on a Marine who's been through real ones. The system started failing Wednesday morning. Small things first. A Milwaukee freight order vanished. Client called twice, furious by the third ring. Thursday brought missing invoices that disappeared like they'd never existed. Friday, car batteries routed to Vermont instead of Virginia, costing $6,000 in corrections. Each problem manageable alone, but together they formed the exact pattern I'd spent 17 years preventing. Now they bled freely through every gap I used to seal. The office buzzed with nervous energy. My name whispered in break rooms, hidden in Slack threads, passed around with lunch conversations. "Did you see that contract thing?" He had some serious IP rights. Heard he emailed the board before leaving the parking lot. Big Jim Morrison stayed quiet. That silence said more than any statement. When Big Jim goes quiet, people notice. Like forest animals before a storm. Then Jake found the smoking gun. The junior developer, reviewing code dependencies for a routine update, discovered what everyone had missed. Deep in the automated routing system, copyright D. Sullivan Freight Protocol. Do not modify without legal clearance. He searched the logs. I hadn't just written the original framework. My protocols were the framework. Renamed, repackaged, but the skeleton of everything running their logistics chain belonged to me. Jake did what smart junior employees do. Screenshot everything, zip it up, slip a printout onto his manager's desk with a note. "Think we owe Sullivan royalties." That note traveled 3 desks by lunch. HR by 1500, legal by 1700. By Monday, Harold's inbox had 15 threads marked urgent, Sullivan IP rights. I never tweeted, never posted LinkedIn wisdom, never said a word. Didn't need to. Absence was its own presence, like a missing support beam in a building you thought was solid. No drama, no threats. Just quiet chaos rippling through every system I'd designed, every protocol I'd written, every safeguard I'd built to keep their operation running smooth. And somewhere in those flickering monitors and panicked middle managers, one truth crystallized. Dan Sullivan wasn't just a former employee. He was a loaded weapon they'd tossed on the boardroom table and dared someone to pick up. Tyler was about to learn what happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight one. Subject line, Notice of Contract Breach, Clause 15 DIP Ownership Review. Sent at 0602 hours before half the executive floor had wiped sleep from their eyes. My timing had always been surgical. 5 paragraphs, no fluff, no anger. Just facts. Dear board members, on termination date, I was informed without prior consultation that my position had been eliminated. Per Clause 15D, such restructuring requires written approval due to active deployment of Sullivan Freight Protocol architecture. This termination occurred while said systems remained in operational use without formal consent. For reference, I've attached IP documentation, active code samples, and signed original agreement. While I trust this was administrative oversight, legal implications of breach and royalty delinquency require immediate clarification. I remain available for resolution discussions. Attachments: Bradshaw, original contract, SFP IP overview, freight operations code excerpts. I copied only board members. No HR, no Tyler's team. Then I made breakfast like any other Tuesday. Because for me, it was routine. This was what happened when someone confused silence for surrender. By 0800, replies started arriving. Martha Dewey, compliance officer, when are you available? Big Jim Morrison, we need to talk. At 0837, someone blind copied me an internal thread. Urgent review, termination protocols plus legal exposure. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. I knew corporate panic when I saw it brewing. At 9:10, emergency meetings began. Boardroom doors closed early. Schedules cleared. Someone canceled Tyler's Innovation Culture webinar without telling him. Harold walked in carrying legal documents and wearing the expression of a man about to face his own failures. Legal had started pulling every signature Tyler had made since I left. Vendor contracts, system updates, a partnership with analytics firms, all built on software running my code without compensation. The phrase willful infringement appeared in email threads. So did malicious restructuring and retroactive equity corrections. One attorney wrote, "This isn't just wrongful termination. He may own significant company assets." Outside the glass walls, Tyler posed for social media photos about disruptive leadership. Inside, actual disruption was unfolding through legal memos and board-level alarm. I still hadn't replied to anyone because power doesn't announce itself. It just arrives when needed, carrying evidence sharp enough to end careers. Tyler discovered the board session the same way he learned everything else lately. Last. He'd strutted into the executive lounge mid-morning, overpriced coffee in hand, scrolling LinkedIn like it held life's answers. That's when he spotted them. Big Jim entering conference room B with Harold, Martha, and the legal team. No invitation, no courtesy notification from Marlene, who now walked past him carrying folders marked Sullivan YP/Clause 15D. Something cold shifted in Tyler's chest. The first taste of real consequence. He rushed back to his office, slammed the door, dialed my number. Ring, ring. Voicemail. Again. Straight to voicemail. His message, "Hey Dan, maybe we got off wrong. Just want to talk, figure this out privately, you know?" His voice cracked on privately. 15 minutes later, my autoresponder replied, "Currently unavailable. If urgent, contact someone who didn't call me non-essential." Tyler threw his phone, knocked over a crystal paperweight, watched it shatter into sharp reminders that control was an illusion. Then he made his final mistake. He stormed down to development, demanding Jake show him system logs. "I need to see exactly what Sullivan built," Tyler said, breathing hard. "Everything." Jake pulled up the operations terminal with shaking hands. Line after line of code appeared until Jake highlighted the critical sections. Copyright D. Sullivan, SFP Core Logic V2. 4. Do not modify without legal clearance. Below that, use without licensing constitutes IP ownership breach. It was everywhere. Hundreds of watermarks embedded in data routing, core logic, version histories. I hadn't just built their system. I'd branded every piece like ownership papers. What if we just modernized everything? Tyler asked, desperation creeping in. Strip out his tags, update the code. Quick solution. Jake froze mid-keystroke. Sir, that would be fraud. Who mentioned fraud? I'm talking innovation, creative problem solving. Tyler's voice took on the tone of someone who'd watched too many movies where bribes worked. Maybe worth a bonus for your discretion. Jake's silence spoke louder than any whistle he could blow. By 1600 hours, Jake had emailed HR and legal with a transcript of Tyler's innovation suggestion. Subject line, "This conversation made me uncomfortable. Please advise." It took 30 minutes for that email to reach Big Jim, Harold, and the emergency board session Tyler still hadn't been invited to join. By 1715, Tyler's keycard access had been quietly downgraded. Not revoked, just limited. He wouldn't notice until he tried accessing restricted areas. Because desperation has a distinct smell, and when it starts rotting, it attracts the kind of attention that topples kingdoms. Harold stared at the growing pile of legal documents on his desk, each one representing another way his son had exposed the company to catastrophic liability. 17 years of careful relationship building with me, destroyed in one impulsive morning. The boy had wanted to prove himself as a leader. Instead, he'd proven why experience matters, why preparation beats privilege, and why you never start a war with someone who's actually fought in real ones. Harold didn't knock. He stood outside my door longer than any CEO should, holding a manila folder like it contained his company's death certificate. Dressed in civilian clothes, slacks and windbreaker, like a man who knew this wasn't business anymore. This was surrender. I opened the door without a word. No welcome, no pleasantries. My house was what you'd expect from a divorced Marine. Clean, practical, nothing wasted. The dining table was covered with legal documents, case studies, family photos, and yellow legal pads filled with notes that looked more like battle plans than reminders. I didn't offer coffee. He didn't ask. I was wrong, Harold started, staring at my documentation spread like evidence. Never should have given him that position. Thought real responsibility would teach him leadership costs. I didn't think he'd try to destroy the one person who'd kept us alive through every crisis. But he did, I said. The silence stretched between us. Harold looked at my legal preparation like a man seeing his own tactical mistakes laid bare. I slid a folder across the table. Reinstatement offer. Immediate effect. 6 months back pay. Retroactive equity adjustment for milestones achieved using my IP. 3-year licensing contract for all current and derivative systems. My terms. Harold stared at it without opening. And if I don't sign, I walk into Carrington Freight tomorrow at 0900. Already had coffee with their CTO. He understands what I built, knows what I own, and he's very interested in exclusive licensing rights, especially knowing your legal exposure. Harold's voice dropped to barely audible. You'd really burn it all? I tilted my head. I'd charge market value for what it's worth. That hit him. This wasn't revenge or wounded pride. This was business, cold, calculated, fair. I'd built my case the same way I'd rebuilt his freight network during every crisis. Methodically, precisely, with zero margin for error. You don't want the old job back? Not like it was. But I'll take something better, something with respect built in. Harold reached for a pen with unsteady hands. I'll handle Tyler. Number. I held up one hand. Let him face the board first. Let him learn what non-essential feels like when it's applied to him. Harold looked up. You always said you didn't believe in revenge. For the first time in days, I smiled. I don't. I believe in consequences. He signed without reading it. 3 hours later, Tyler strutted into the boardroom like he was delivering a TED Talk he'd improvised but felt confident about. His trademark half-smirk, blazer fitted tight enough to signal innovation leadership, eyes scanning faces for approval that never came. The room held that particular silence that precedes career executions. Then he saw me. I sat at the far end of the table, calm, unmoved, closed folder before me, hands folded like a witness who already knew the verdict. I didn't acknowledge him, didn't react. Just waited. Tyler's confidence flickered. He adjusted his collar, cleared his throat twice. Good morning, everyone. Excited to discuss operational improvements and strategic initiatives going forward. No need, Big Jim cut in without looking up. We've had a comprehensive morning reviewing recent decisions. Tyler blinked. I'm sorry? Martha read from her folder. Clause 15, paragraph D. No structural or leadership changes, including termination or reassignment, shall be executed without written consent of Mr. Sullivan if company operations utilize intellectual property authored during his employment. Pause for effect. Which they did. Which they do. The legal counsel spoke next. Discovery reveals 78% of freight operations utilize proprietary code from Sullivan Freight Protocol. Unauthorized modification would require 8 months minimum and complete relicensing. I remained silent. Harold sat at the table's head, watching his son confront reality without interference or rescue. Tyler laughed, but it sounded hollow. Okay, but we're all professionals here. Dan, you could have approached me directly instead of involving everyone. I finally moved. Slowly opened my folder, slid a flash drive across polished wood. Press play, I said. Voice quiet, but it cut through the room. Martha inserted the drive. The wall screen displayed our freight automation dashboard in high definition. Real-time routing, predictive analytics, load optimization, every feature running smooth as precision engineering. Bottom corner, small but permanent. Powered by D. Sullivan EP Holdings. The silence that followed had weight. Career-ending weight. The CFO broke it. 3 vendors have contacted us since Monday. 1 threatens legal action over undisclosed IP rights and licensing agreements. Without immediate resolution, we face breach litigation, retroactive royalties, and system-wide relicensing. Tyler's jaw worked soundlessly. So you're choosing him over me? We're choosing the company over liability, Big Jim said. He turned to me. Mr. Sullivan, do your terms remain the same? I stood, adjusting my tie with deliberate calm. Actually, they've changed. Surprise rippled around the table. I appreciate the offer, but I won't be returning. I met Harold's eyes directly. Yesterday, I accepted a position with Carrington Freight. Full IP autonomy, equity participation, and complete operational independence. No Bradshaws involved. Tyler opened his mouth. I cut him off with a look that conveyed 17 years of accumulated patience finally exhausted. I gathered my materials, headed for the door, paused without turning back. To whoever inherits this situation, start by changing all system passwords. I wouldn't trust current access protocols. Walking out of that building for the final time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not satisfaction or vindication, just balance restored. The natural order where competence gets rewarded, experience earns respect, and actions have appropriate consequences. Tyler slumped into his chair as board members began discussing damage control and interim leadership structures. Nobody requested his input. Nobody ever would again. Outside, I sat in my truck for a moment before starting the engine. 17 years of building something, watching some privileged kid try to erase it in one morning, then using his own arrogance to reclaim everything plus interest. Marines don't retreat, we advance toward better positions. Sometimes the best victory is walking away from a fight you've already won, carrying everything you earned plus everything they thought they could take. My phone buzzed with a text from my oldest. Dad, saw the LinkedIn post about your new job. Proud of you for not settling. I smiled, started the engine, and drove toward whatever came next. If you've ever been written off by someone who confused their position with their competence, you understand this feeling. Experience doesn't just matter. Sometimes it's the only thing that does.